Hollywood's golden age is remembered for its glamour, its legends, and its perfect on-screen heroes. But behind that shining curtain, there were actors so dark, so dangerous, and so cruel that Ron Howard once called them the real evil of old Hollywood. These were the faces the studios protected, the names audiences adored, and the secrets no one dared to reveal. According to Ron Howard, some of these actors were silent monsters, charming in front of the camera but terrifying the moment it turned off. Some ruled film sets with violence and fear. Some used their fame to control, manipulate, and destroy lives. Others carried scandals so disturbing that entire studios spent fortunes to bury the truth forever. In this video, we uncover the 6 actors Ron Howard claims had the darkest reputations of the Golden Age. These aren't just rumors, these are the stories that reshaped Hollywood, shook its foundation, and revealed the industry's true, hidden nightmare. What you're about to hear isn't polished, and it isn't glamorous. These are the shadows behind the spotlight, the secrets that survived for decades, and the dark side of Hollywood that was never meant to be exposed. Get ready. Because now, we're stepping into a world where fame hid cruelty, where power erased consequences, and where some of Hollywood's biggest legends were the ones everyone should have feared. Actor number 1 is Errol Flynn, the man Hollywood sold as the perfect hero. Audiences adored his charm, his sword fights, his smile, but Ron Howard says Flynn's real story was darker than any villain ever written. Behind the dazzling costumes and legendary roles, he lived a life built on manipulation, danger, and chaos. Flynn was the kind of star studios protected at any cost, because the truth behind his image was something that could have destroyed an entire era of Hollywood overnight. Flynn moved through Hollywood like a king without rules. Sets were his playground and people were his toys. Crew members claimed he was unpredictable, charming one second, explosive the next. He pushed boundaries, ignored orders, and treated every limit as a challenge. And the more powerful he became, the more dangerous his behavior grew. Rumors followed him everywhere, stories of wild parties, reckless affairs, and a lifestyle that spiraled into darker territory as the years went on. Flynn didn't just live on the edge, he built a home there. But the real darkness began when accusations emerged that threatened to crack his heroic image forever. The studio rushed in with lawyers, cash, and influence to bury the fallout. Witnesses vanished, evidence disappeared, and what should have been a career-ending scandal became just another secret locked inside Hollywood's vault of silence. Flynn knew he was protected, and he acted like it. His addictions deepened, his temper worsened, and the people around him learned that being close to him meant living in constant fear of what he might do next. Ron Howard describes Flynn as the symbol of old Hollywood's greatest lie, a man worshipped as a hero while carrying a darkness powerful enough to stain the entire industry. To the world, he was a legend. Behind the scenes, he was the storm everyone prayed would pass. Actor number 2 is Joan Crawford, the glamorous queen of Hollywood who ruled the screen with elegance, power, and flawless perfection. But Ron Howard says Crawford's real legacy lives in the shadows, far away from the red carpets and glowing close-ups. Behind every award, every headline, and every carefully crafted public moment, there was a woman driven by fear, rage, and a level of control that turned her home and her film sets into battlegrounds. Crawford was relentless. She believed weakness was death, and she treated the people around her accordingly. Crew members whispered that she demanded absolute obedience, from makeup artists to directors. A single mistake meant a storm of rage. Her presence was so intense that even seasoned actors admitted they feared sharing a scene with her. Crawford wasn't acting powerful, she was powerful, and she made sure everyone felt it. But it was her life behind closed doors that shaped her darkest reputation. The stories that emerged from her adopted children revealed a home ruled by intimidation, punishment, and emotional warfare. Howard describes Crawford as someone who lived in a constant battle with her own image, cleaning, controlling, and correcting everything around her until the line between discipline and cruelty disappeared completely. She believed perfection was survival, and anyone who stood in the way became a target for her anger. On set, her obsession with staying relevant created an atmosphere of paranoia. She studied her co-stars, competed with them, and sometimes sabotaged them. Producers walked on eggshells, terrified that offending her could trigger a meltdown that would shut down production for days. And yet, the cameras loved her. Studios protected her. Audiences worshipped her. Joan Crawford was Hollywood's greatest contradiction, a woman celebrated as a timeless icon, while carrying a darkness that left scars long after the lights went out. Actor number 3 is Charlie Chaplin, the man the world adored as a harmless comedian, the lovable tramp who brought joy to millions. But Ron Howard says Chaplin's private reality was far from innocent. Behind the silent films, the bowler hat, and the legendary smile was a man consumed by obsession, control, and a long trail of controversies that old Hollywood worked desperately to erase. Chaplin perfected the image of a gentle, misunderstood clown, but off-screen, he was calculated, demanding, and often ruthless. Co-stars described him as a perfectionist who pushed people far beyond their limits. He would force actors to repeat scenes hundreds of times, sometimes until they collapsed from exhaustion. Chaplin didn't care about comfort or safety, he cared about absolute control, and anyone who challenged him found themselves replaced or destroyed in silence. But the real shadow over Chaplin's name came from his relationships. For decades, rumors circulated about his obsession with much younger women. Some of these relationships sparked public outrage, scandals, and courtroom battles that threatened to end his career. Instead of facing consequences, Chaplin used fame, money, and influence to silence critics and bury evidence. Studios stepped in to protect him, terrified that losing their biggest star would crumble the empire they built on his back. His political views added another layer of darkness. As tensions rose in America, Chaplin became a target for suspicion, but instead of calming the storm, he doubled down. Confrontations with the government, accusations of manipulation, and whispers about his motives created an atmosphere of mistrust around him. Howard describes Chaplin as a genius who believed he was untouchable, a man who manipulated the world with comedy while his private life spiraled deeper into chaos. Charlie Chaplin was worshipped globally, but his legacy carries a shadow Hollywood never wanted the world to see, a darkness hidden behind a smile. Actor number 4 is Bela Lugosi, the man who became immortal as Dracula, but whose real life drifted into darkness far deeper than any horror film ever produced. Ron Howard describes Lugosi as a tragic figure consumed by addiction, rage, ego, and a slow spiral into self-destruction that terrified the people who worked with him. Hollywood celebrated him as a monster on screen, but behind the scenes, some believed the monster was real. Lugosi entered Hollywood with charm and discipline, but fame twisted him in ways no one expected. He struggled with jealousy, convinced that other actors were stealing roles that belonged to him. Crew members recalled that he carried his Dracula persona everywhere, speaking dramatically, demanding respect, and exploding in fury whenever he felt ignored. Directors learned quickly that one wrong instruction could trigger a storm of anger so intense that entire sets would shut down for the day. But the real darkness came from his growing addiction to morphine and later, other drugs. Originally prescribed for chronic pain, the medication consumed him completely. His behavior became erratic. Some days he arrived on set trembling, sweating, unable to remember lines. Other days he wandered the studio in a haze, muttering to himself, convinced producers were plotting against him. People who worked with him described moments where his eyes seemed hollow, his temper unpredictable, and his sense of reality slipping away. As his addiction deepened, Lugosi's paranoia grew. He accused friends of betrayal, shouted at assistants, and isolated himself from everyone who tried to help. Hollywood responded not with compassion, but with distance. Roles disappeared, contracts fell apart, and Lugosi, once the face of horror, became a cautionary tale whispered across the industry. He accepted low-budget films just to feed his habit, often collapsing after takes or vanishing for hours during production. Actor number 5 isn't a single performer, it's the group Ron Howard says represented the darkest, most predatory side of Hollywood's golden age, the studio heads who controlled Judy Garland. These were powerful men who didn't appear on screen, but their influence shaped every moment of Garland's life. They turned a young girl into a global sensation, and then into their prisoner. Judy Garland entered Hollywood as a child, but the studio executives treated her as property, not a person. They controlled when she slept, what she ate, who she spoke to, and how she behaved. Ron Howard describes them as a machine fueled by greed, men who believed a star existed only to serve the studio. Garland's natural innocence was transformed into a weapon they used to sell films, while behind the curtain, they stripped her of freedom, safety, and identity. They starved her to keep her thin, giving her only small bowls of soup and black coffee. When she became exhausted, they didn't let her rest, they handed her pills. Pep pills to wake her up. Sleeping pills to slow her down. This cycle wasn't a treatment, it was a trap designed to keep her working like a machine. Crew members later admitted that Garland often filmed scenes with trembling hands and unfocused eyes, but no one dared to protect her. The studio heads had spoken, the show must go on. As Garland grew older, the pressure intensified. They criticized her appearance, compared her to other actresses, and convinced her she was worthless without them. Every rebellion resulted in punishment, cancelled contracts, threats of blacklisting, and emotional manipulation that left her terrified of losing everything. By her 20s, the addiction they created had taken over her life, yet the studios walked away without consequence, pretending they had nothing to do with her collapse. Ron Howard calls these studio heads the real villains of Hollywood's golden age. They didn't just damage Judy Garland's career. Actor number 6 is Fatty Arbuckle, the comedian whose fall from Hollywood royalty became one of the darkest scandals in film history. Ron Howard describes Arbuckle's story as a shocking reminder that fame can protect a man for years, until the truth becomes too big to bury. Arbuckle was once the highest-paid comedian in the world, loved for his harmless humor and childlike charm. But behind the laughter was a lifestyle spiraling into excess, reckless behavior, and decisions that would destroy everything he built. Arbuckle moved through Hollywood like nothing could touch him. Success had given him power, and power made him careless. His parties became legendary, wild, chaotic nights filled with alcohol, strangers, and whispers of disturbing behavior. Many who attended said Arbuckle changed when the cameras were off. The innocent clown vanished, replaced by a man who pushed boundaries with a dangerous sense of entitlement. He thought his fame made him untouchable, until one party triggered a scandal so massive it nearly killed Hollywood itself. When actress Virginia Rappe died after a hotel gathering Arbuckle hosted, the world turned against him overnight. Newspapers painted him as a monster, describing details so graphic that even today, historians struggle to separate fact from rumor. Court cases followed, filled with conflicting testimonies, missing evidence, and a public hungry for blood. Studios panicked. Reporters feasted on the chaos. And Arbuckle, who once ruled comedy, became the face of Hollywood corruption. Though he was eventually acquitted, the damage was permanent. The public had already chosen their villain. Arbuckle couldn't find work, couldn't escape the accusations, and couldn't rebuild the life he lost. Hollywood erased him from posters, censored his films, and pretended he had never existed. Ron Howard says Arbuckle's darkness wasn't just in what happened, but in how the industry reacted. They protected him when it benefited them,